The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I cordial with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
Tēnā koutou katoa, I'm Toby Manhire. This has Gone By Lunchtime, a very special New Year's Eve edition. Just a short one of Gone By Lunchtime. We would love to be with you all the way through to the new year, but unfortunately we don't have the bandwidth quite for that. How was Christmas for you guys? Have a great time?
That was amazing.
Yeah. Did you have a lovely Christmas?
I spent it by myself. It was really nice.
Here in the studio.
In the studio, editing this podcast.
Amazing. Thank
interesting.
you. Thank you for your service.
That's a little bit of a mental leap.
It's a real Luca sort of situation.
We're going to just talk very quickly in order to cast forward to the next year, which, according to my notes, is 2025. Talk very briefly about what we think some of the big themes coming down the slipway are, and maybe finish with an outlandish prediction. So if you want to kind of percolate on that. Ben, big issue for you. What do you think the big issue will be next year?
I think immediately upon resuming, we'll be thrust back into the treaty stuff. Treaty Principles Bill hearings will be starting sort of shortly. Waitangi Day and Ratana, the so-called Māori political calendar. So no respite for the government there. I think the defining issue politically this year is going to be the cohesion of the coalition.
Annabelle, we were talking in our last podcast, which we recorded some weeks ago now, about the ferry issue and how that was some of the coalition internal mechanics were starting to spill out, to row out of the coalition tension.
Yeah, I think it does have the potential to become a flashpoint between New Zealand First and ACT, and I think particularly with the transfer of power from Peters to Seymour, and what that means in terms of the dynamics of their relationship and the investment in the coalition will be interesting to watch. I think, of course, as Ben says, beginning of the Māori political calendar, Waitangi Ratana, but I think another interesting issue to look out for, aside from the Treaty Principles Bill, is the regulatory standards bill that's going before Parliament, being pushed by ACT, with its strong focus on efficiency, protecting the markets, all that kind of stuff. And there's, concerns about what that means for environmental protections, protection of te tiriti, mana whenua interests, all of those things. It's designed to increase wages and productivity. I mean, you could just raise the minimum wage and those things, but this is what he's pushing for instead. And I think it could either go under the radar and people not realise how important it is until it's been passed, or it could kick off. And then the other one is the RMA reforms, which of course will have a huge impact on Māori and their ability to participate in, what's happening within their rohe and how the consequences it may have for their treaty settlements and their interests in their takiwā.
I think another one that is going to really be fascinating to watch in 2025 is the health sector. There's always pressure on the health sector. We've seen in recent times a couple of things. There was the protest over the Dunedin hospital situation, which I think took a lot of people by surprise, just the strength of feeling, the strength of numbers, and what that represents as a kind of microcosm in a way. The issue is big in itself, but a microcosm of a depth of feeling that probably spans the whole country. Then we also had the grilling of Lester Levy by Aisha Vera, which may or may not have gone over the top, but that again I think is a little bit of a kind of augury of some of the tensions within the Health New Zealand and the management of the budget and the broader questions over whether or not there is too much pressure on limited funds within health. Another one, I think, in terms of the coalition, there's that May 31 date, which I think should be like a full changing of the guard down the mall and, proper kind of pageantry and everything. I think it should be a full march from the Beehive to Government House for that to be properly observed. But on the flip side of that, so that will contain the various tensions that we've talked about already. But on the flip side of that, I think that there will be more scrutiny than there has been so far of what the alternative coalition is, assuming that we remain in this idea of these two blocks, which we haven't seen quite to this extent. Obviously, MMP involves different ideas of coalitions, but it's interesting the use of hung parliament as a term, which in a way every MMP election, apart from 2020, is a hung election, but it's started to be used now to describe what's really a heat between two blocks, and whether or not there is a cohesiveness, a sufficient consistency between the policies of the three-party. Labour and Green have spent a lot of years trying to do that with budget responsibility rules and all sorts of other stuff. Te Pāti Māori's policy, Te Pāti Māori's manifesto is quite difficult to imagine working within a coalition agreement, and I think that the coalition that's in charge now will be working harder to try and apply attention to whether or not that can stand scrutiny.
I think conversely too, the challenge that the government coalition has is, Te Pāti Māori has a number of safe electoral seats wrapped up. New Zealand First is always reliant on getting over that 5%, and depending on, what happens on critical issues like the Cook Strait ferries, that puts New Zealand First in a slightly more vulnerable position.
Yeah, the temperature turns up across the board. The other thing, which you'll be excited about, Ben, is local elections are in 2025. I think Wellington will be very interesting. At this point, Tory whānau has been under an awful lot of pressure, and that council has certainly tipped into the dysfunctional bucket from time to time. Whether she's indicated she will still stand, whether or not she can survive, get a second term will be interesting. I think that obviously it depends part on who stands against and whether that vote might be split. In Auckland, where you worked on the campaign for Wayne Brown last time, Ben, there's been a bit of talk around about whether or not Desley Simpson might stand, a bit of talk about whether or not the right-wing group, that is the CNR and the national analogue, whether or not there's been some talk that they will stand someone, but I think in the end,
isn't it? Wasn't it rumored Paula Bennett?
Maybe there's been talk about her being, but I just think in the end, I don't know if there's been maybe there's been any internal polling, but it's incredible from Wayne Brown looking so, frankly, inept during the floods, where his, perhaps his what do you call it, EQ isn't the highest. From there, he seems to have somehow kind of captured the mood of the city, but also shown his ability to work really across the divide. He's very much not into caucused councils. He's got through a budget. He's managed to. He's actually changed his position on a number of things when people have put arguments to him. So I think he's in for that. And I think my prediction, don't know if you want to talk to this at all, Ben, but my prediction is that he'll pretty much go through unopposed. And then in what's the next one be? 2028, Swarbrick versus Bridges.
Yeah, look, I can't see any obvious challenges for Wayne. Paula Bennett's a name that's been mooted. You know, she hasn't done much to discourage speculation in the past, but she's busy. She's got a lot of things on now under this current government and a lot of big jobs, including chair of Pharmac. And I don't
And real
know
estate.
And yeah, as well as a day job, which is probably, a bit more lucrative and a bit less pressure than, having to be, the mayor of the city. So I couldn't see that there'll be any real enthusiasm that, in terms of that, whatever the centre-right group's called, communities and ratepayers. No, was it communities
Citizens
and
and
residents?
Used to be citizens and ratepayers and is now communities and residents. Is that
Oh.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, they kept the C and R
Smart.
Yeah,
and they
this is-
changed it's brilliant.
This
I think
Brilliant.
they
It
should go
is.
again. They
Yeah.
should just keep changing it. Keep us guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Croissants and rolls.
Oh,
Yeah, every mayoral election, there's always speculation about, what will the fearsome right wing bloc do? Who will they send in their ability choice? And in the past it's been Vic Crone, and who's the last one that we ran against? Viv Beck. Just literally, they. Everyone's like, what's the powerful right-wing bloc up to? And basically a bunch of these old fucking senior citizens former national
oh, come on. No, that's not fair.
just wander through the fucking Rotary Club or Westfield Mall or something and fucking grab
Listen to
somebody
this.
in a pantsuit and this should be the mayor.
Wayne Brown, Brains Trust.
And then everybody's like,
there.
oh no,
This
another
is-
challenger is entered. So no, I don't think that's credible.
It's important for our audience to know that the only thing Ben loves more than pre-food is local government elections, eh?
Loves it. He just loves all the workings of local government, doesn't he?
He does. He loves it. I think the other thing that's going to be interesting to look out for in terms of local government next year is, for those councils that have to have a referendum on their Māori seats, what the outcome of those will be.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing, that's very squarely a National Party policy, and so the Nats will be able to blame ACT for treaty/race stuff sucking up all the oxygen in the first part of the year, but they don't really have any excuses come September, October. So I think it's going to be a very difficult year for the government, particularly the national part of it, which doesn't like dealing with this treaty stuff, and doesn't like the division that it's causing. But it's going to be all throughout next year. As Annabelle said, RMA reforms will probably touch on it. It's hard to see them sort of expanding the existing kind of treaty rights. That treaty clause review will be kicking in. It'll be we'll have a slew of judgments from the various from the courts on the marine and coastal area, and we'll see the impact of the Supreme Court's decision alongside the amendment if the government has already passed.
Does the government pursue that legislation, or do they go, that's fine, the courts are going to look after it?
I can't remember what they did 2 weeks ago, which was 3 weeks after our last podcast. And in the past, so my memory is easy.
Oh, so you think there will be a decision announced on that after December 12, at which point we all went away for a holiday off-grid and have only now returned today on December 31. Thereby, if any news happened in the interim, we're not aware of it.
Yes.
Good.
And the other thing I think that will be interesting, just going back to, getting away from issues, boring, into politics, exciting, smart person stuff, is like we're going to continue to see this sort of, the kind of most postmodern nature of the government, in the sense that I think in the past, people talked about narrative. They talked about the story. The story is that this government's doing this and you'd try and be sort of consistent on things, and that was never actually the case, right, in terms of the practicalities of governing. But now there's not even a sort of pretense of it, prior to this new year, which we're ringing in now. At the end of last year, we saw the failure of Solar Zero, which was a firm that had been co-invested in by the Green Investment Bank, set up by the Greens when they had been supporting Labour in government. And
BlackRock.
BlackRock, one of the biggest energy investors in the world, and so it looks like the Green Investment Fund, and thus the taxpayer, is going to be on the hook for a significant sum. And we've had the finance minister sort of going in and, kind of, taking a stern look and saying, well, we don't know if they did good enough due diligence. We have to, we'll have to look at all their other investments. We'll already, and this was a modest $100 million fund as it started out that the Greens negotiated for, that had to lend on commercial terms, had to do due diligence and business cases. They were partnering with literally one of the biggest firms in the world that the government has been, the governments have been trying to get to invest in New Zealand in renewables. And now it's like, well, the future of the fund is under threat. And that I think that happened about 2 or 3 days after the government gave another $12 million to Shane Jones's mussel factory in Opotiki, which has never turned a profit.
This is seafood rather than biceps, just to be clear.
Yes. Sorry, the aquaculture processing facility in Opotiki, which was built with Provincial Growth Fund money, has not turned a profit since, and has just received another glob of millions of dollars. So there's no attempt to sort of reconcile these sort of different ideas about sort of fiscal responsibility and due diligence. Like, it really just is this, New Zealand First Ministers do this, ACT ministers do this, national ministers do this, and sometimes they'll be in dialogue with each other through contradictory press releases, but otherwise, you don't need to think about it too much.
Annabelle, have you got anything else to add, or are you ready to move on to your prediction?
I'm ready for my prediction.
Are you ready to do that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
My prediction is that for all of the issues listed by Ben that impact on Māori that will be going before Parliament next year, I think that we will see Te Pāti Māori further grow its support in the polls, and that will put pressure on Labour to think about. I think obviously Te Pāti Māori and the Greens can work well together. The sticking point is how Labour are going to be able to have a relationship with them where everybody's getting, what they need, but Labour's going to have to put some serious thought into that if they want to look like if there's a chance of them leading after the next election.
My prediction, which is absolutely a ridiculous prediction as opposed to Annabelle's one, unless it comes true, in which case it's serious and prophetic, is that Donald Trump will announce a visit to New Zealand.
Oh, that's a good one. Do you think he will, though? Would he come here?
I don't think there's any. I was trying to think maybe there's some summit if he was going to Australia, he might pop over, I think that'd be nice. Play a game, round of golf, go and hang out with Bob Charles.
Oh, yeah, he'd like a round of golf. He'd love to play golf here.
T.I. here, have you got a prediction for the year 2025?
I do predict that we're going to sell out on the 9th of April, Wednesday, 7 p.m. at Q Theatre.
Man, what an operator. If you're thinking of what to do with those Prezi cards that you got given at Christmas, come along and see us in Auckland. We'd love to see you there. Ben?
After a quiet and probably reasonably encouraging first year back in opposition, I think that Labour will contrive to tear itself apart over a potential capital gains tax. And I think at some point the Greens will realise that they're losing more than a trivial number of their voters to Te Pāti Māori, and they may have to sort of reassess their kind of relationship as their treaty partnership as tangata whenua and guilty supplicants. And so I think that there will be a lot of I think there's trouble ahead on the left side.
Interesting, trouble ahead. As I often say, only time will tell. Like that's enough. Hey, Happy New Year, everybody! We love you very much, don't we?
Love you so much.
So much.
Yeah. My other prediction is it'll be a great 2025 for all our listeners. if you're interested in
fade this out.
political bullshit,
fade it out.
I feel like 2025 is going to be a good year.
Nice.
Oh, one last thing before we say goodbye for the year. Thanks to everyone who's helped us make this podcast. Obviously, all of us, you know us, but especially someone who we don't hear from on the podcast, and is Jane Yee, who's recently departed the spin-off, but turned the spin-off podcast operation from this absolute ramshackle operation into this smooth-running, roll-on, roll-off network, and has been so helpful to us at Gone by Lunchtime, but also a whole range of other podcasts. She EP'd Juggernaut. She was involved in the Dead Jane podcast and just gave herself in her heart and her head. And we just acknowledge that and say thanks so much, Jane. We love you a lot.
Nui te aroha ki a koe, Jane.
Love you heaps, Jane. Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spinoff Podcast Network.